I can imagine. I'm collecting the slides.
Yeah, thank you very much. From section 10 section 10. And this section is on language, urbanism, and identical indicators. My name is Tyler Lawrenson. I'm Professor of Urban Management and Governance here at the University of New York. I'm co-chairing with me Dr. Soye Abelechi, also of the University of New York. Dr. Abelechi, I'm calling this session, and I just got a patient for thanks so very much. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this has found out of the child. Hope that the end of the days, this project starts with language, urbanism, and identity. And therefore, this is spending so we need all the questions, all the institutions so this more out from many projects that I was saying going for now. Language one for it's negotiation also being as development of funding and look at the how the different people that are talking about and professional and it's creating form now to advanced center and work in communication and people that understanding professional. As this one person language, and then look at that is that this is fast. But you know that first probably the multicultural setting to maintain that unity. And so what to see how people are because of take all this very good. So the first because how we develop problem here. We have a lot of people out there. Always said how people we just became do this we have this we want I'm trying so all here on so what's the game? How we are going to start with okay. We do our presentation now. We should have a slide. And we look at who does this to our but thank you very much. My thoughts are on way to get but the talk of this one at how organization as actually shapes the people that you see in different areas in Lagos State. Particularly if you look at Lagos, once I was able to look at a number of communities around Lagos, like Nigeria, Bariga, Ajeokude, Akapa, and all around the communities, I now see on Ajeokude. And the same why Ajeokude, of course, like the platform where you have for all different parts of Nigeria cluster. And the way the doctrine is done
you find that they cluster along the lines of every one way. They cluster along the lines of people who having to have the same kind of religion together, and they also cluster in those places because like the work of white or dancing and standards and this. These are places where the community vocabulary is present. People come from, for example, come from Delta, come from Calabash, come from all across the Nigeria. Their community people, so to say, that they can stay with people who can give them a space to stay with them for as long as they are able to find their needs and they can move on. The people can remember that these people have pitched their tents to be able to build their own homes in these places because they are able to survive. It's about identity and language. In these places, for example, there's a place called in Nigeria, in Nigeria, or Tolu in Nigeria, JNJ. You find that along those places are the identity people. It's not as if you find guests of other tribes, other tribes in those places, but every child who lives in that area can understand the Nigerian language. And if you go down to where they call Angausa, Angoausa, or you have a Hausa line, you also find that segment of people, it is a lot easier for the Hausa people, but they come in and they're able to go and pick their tent with their Hausa brothers and people who can speak the same language as them. And then you also find out when we talk about urbanism, what are the things, what are the very problem things you see among people that are strictly in those areas, among people in that Hausa line. You see them dressing, you see that in the evenings, you see the evening life, not those to find in a place like Kano, but in a place like Katsina or anywhere in northern Nigeria. So about their identity as influenced by the places where they can call home, as influenced by the places where they are able to reach their tent and survive. And that they get still in that place. Yes, but I think that is changing again. And then so that's why that changed. About 20 years, 30, 50 years ago, you will hear them say, I think that in Louisville, this is also now very much that for is speaking people, the normal speaking people can only that also that way. People come into their way of comment there, and then they reach their tent also with their reverend, their people, and then they also find home there. What we find in the end place where you have the support. There's no child who grows up in that place that will not understand the language. And then you have areas where you have a concentration of the people speaking as well. Inside Nigeria, they speak people. They speak pockets of their own language, but they predominantly in the form of Nigeria, they predominantly speak pidgin English, and you say why? Because you have circles, you have robots, you have John, you have Calabash, you have Calabarese, you have the people, and then the importance of Yoruba. So in Nigeria, you find that the people speak predominantly pidgin English language. And then when you move up again to places like places like Trinity within that same axis, this is speak quite a lot of pidgin English language. But at the time, so other entities speak Yoruba, they speak other forms of languages that are taken to the original that they say something. Look at how the interest of Lagos organization structure, how has it influenced the language situation in Lagos? For example, what happened in 1990 in the Maroko? I don't know if you know Maroko. Maroko was a community that had stayed there for decades. And then people also where their own language was speaking English. You see how people who speak people of their own tribes or speak English. There's something happening. I will now by looking at how the education is actually altering the language scape and identity scape in Lagos. The education happened to Maroko, and people were moved out in their thousands. A place where you put very initially said, that changed immediately because the term Maroko to a higher Maroko is today Victoria Island. And we can't readily say in Victoria Island, people live in this area of Victoria Island, they speak XYZ language. No, it is plain English, the English that we speak. So that has changed the landscape of identity and language in Victoria Island today. If you see Victoria Island, that dress as in our Western way of dressing, you don't really find culture in Victoria Island. Except you think you're looking for this guy, Letty Aja. Yes, the Letty Aja, it's not in the Letty Aja as we know. In other smart entities where you find settlements of two people that or people become our other tribes. And then I was also how that's how the state lands become the different parts, different entities to that in these different places in a place not as well, it's not part of this. You will basically what you see, but only that way. And those all small communities along the streets, they speak predominantly a language. And campus to take on studies to them. What we say to these books, if they don't and get them to understand, for them to understand what we see and interpret what they do. To understand what we are also saying, to find out that everything about people in that place is a representation of the culture. The way they dress, the things they do, their food, their festivities, everything they do. In fact, they have their what we call this example of the cultural worship shrine. And culturally, that cultural shrine, or traditional shrine rather, we found to really find those in places like so the students of this people in that area, that entry, you see a complete representation of the culture in Aguero and other smaller communities. And then we find us also as how the language using and expression is in the form of comparison in Lagos. If you go to Lagos Island, you will regularly hear something like touche on fine, you have Igbos and at least a few other types speaking among people from Lagos Island. But everything you see in those entities are predominantly Yoruba culture. Everything you see, I know that people in other tribes, they don't know about Lagos Island. Everything you know, before this time, the Igbos never used to do straight of cash money during taxes. But these are people from culture that they did from the Yoruba who are highly socialized people. They perform this, not just those cultures of how we people socialize in terms of dressing, food and the rest, but even the language. If you go around the Seneca area, there's a child who is born and bring up in Seneca that can't speak. In fact, I know who grow up in Seneca, that's their native, their mother or their native language, but they speak Yoruba very well. So it is also seen as how this is even identity to people. If you look into any area, if you look into any enclave, the first thing you see, you notice about, don't say culture, that it's something of their lifestyle, their every single thing. It's a representation of the greater number of people that you find in these places. I can say to you, if you enter a place like in Kenya, you may say, oh, Kenya is the capital city of Lagos, and you have different people. Then also enter any place in Kenya, you will find a very vivid presentation of cultures of people. Yorubas, and some other practices. Sit on way and what we trying to actually report is narrowing down on what has happened to Morocco and how it's also happening in other city center in Lagos and how it is as well shaping and forcing and restricting the overall culture of the culture, the food, the dressing, the common language to speak, and the thought that they can share and share to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Both for university in your educational science, language and literacy. So, let's go to keep on the which is the work time to short rest or overnight, thriving for business, and switching cultural educations in Lagos, Nigeria. I want to share with start with. Thriving for business. So what is this?
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bode Alej from the University of Lagos. And I'm talking about my ongoing study, short rest or overnight, TDP, the thriving book of business and its socio-cultural applications in Lagos, Nigeria. Next slide. Yes, so for a short introduction, what is book up? And in one sentence, book up is the new linguistic code for prostitution. And when I started this study, my interest was not in what they do or how they do it. It was more of their socio-linguistic prowess, how they use language, such as short rest. What does it mean? CDB, what does it mean? 420 friendly vibe. I actually had a friend having this conversation, and I was interested as a linguist. Let me see what these things really mean and how they came about all of these words. But then, during my little interviews, because I studied this a work in progress, because I find it extremely difficult to elicit data. People who are involved in hookup business really don't want to talk about it. So it made it extremely difficult for me to get data. But then I was working with one person who actually accommodated me, even though she actually didn't allow me to record her. So I didn't get much from her, but I'll share what I have and also seek opinion on how best I can get more data from them. Next slide. So my research methodology actually is I did partial participant observation to stay with them and see what they are doing. And I did some interviews over Zoom. I said partial participant observation because for me to do full participant observation, so partial, yes, partial, because like I will show, the risk involved in doing full observation is more than paying, which also involves paying. So, like every other business, hookup is widely spread in Lagos, in Nigeria especially. Talk of Port Harcourt, Abuja, and Lagos. But then in Lagos, there are hotspots, and I've focused on the hotspots. Lekki Axis, Ikeja, and Surulere. These are where you get some of the best of them. So for anyone, these are the areas that you have to scout for you to get. So these are the areas, and I'm showing this map to show the proximity. Ikeja, Surulere, and Etiosa, inward, Ibeju, Lekki. Now, this is a highly organized venture. Not as much as people think that prostitution in the past used to be ladies on the roadside, you park, then you talk to them. No, these ones are so organized that the price you pay depends on the service you want. For example, 420 friendly, you're actually asking them, once you type 420 friendly, then question mark on WhatsApp, you're asking them, do you smoke? Can we smoke together? Then my consultant actually told me that that's more expensive because you lose your mind when you smoke. And as a sex worker, which they don't like to be called, and I have called them here vixens, you are extra careful in the sense that you are actually earning your money through a very risky adventure. At the same time, you are trying not to contact disease. But when you smoke, you are high, anything can happen. So they charge extra for some of those extra services. Next slide. So I try to do a little tree about how this works. Hook up the new prostitution. Now, this is their modus operandi. We have the higher ones, the escorts. Those ones, you don't see them anywhere. You can't call them. They work covertly. You don't even know them. That's what they do. And those are the ones you see with the big boys, the politicians. So sometimes, according to what I heard, when you hear a politician was involved in an accident and he himself and two other politicians and 15 aides, you begin to wonder, what are they doing with 15 aides? Actually, those are not 15 aides. Some of their escorts are there. Some of their hookup girls that will take care of them at night are there. So they can't possibly go to channels and say, 2 aides and 5 hookup girls. They just call all of them aides. Then we have the ones that are now popular that we call hookup. Those ones are online. You see them on LinkedIn, you see them on Facebook, you see them on InMessage, on Bado. Yeah, LinkedIn, yes. They advertise everything on LinkedIn. It's because your profile is academic and people you are following is academic. So once you follow people, LinkedIn will make suggestions and you see that they advertise. So there is a link between the old style of prostitution and hookup. Actually, what we know as prostitutes are the brothel and roadside ladies. Those ones online also are hookups. So the people you meet physically and pay 5,000 to, if you order them online, you end up paying 25, 30,000. The same set of people, just that you are not going to their brothel, where it is much more cheaper. Next slide. So their modus operandi, like any other form of business, hookup vixens operate with terms and conditions. Like I said, service determine prices. Now, some of them are so organized that if you want them to come to your house, you pay for transport. But let me cite an example. Some of them have apartments, a 3-bedroom. I experienced this at Agungileki, a 3-bedroom, 3 friends who are into hookup. They shared the rooms, one after the other, and instead of going to go and meet men actually come there. That is what they do. So sometimes they require picture. If you talk to them on WhatsApp, they ask you to send your picture for them to see who they are coming to meet. If you want to send your picture, fine. If they can come without the picture, also fine. Also, I must note that there are male vixens, which is beyond what I am doing, but they are very rare. They are also male hookup guys, and they also do all sorts. Next slide. So for my research participants, I've been able to talk to only 32, of which 29 responded very well. Most of them avoided some questions. The age grade that I've seen is between 21 to 37, and they are of mixed ethnicity, all of them of Southern Nigerian origin. Now, I've chosen just 3 interesting stories to me, and I've called them Vixen A, who has been in the business for 8 years. She's married and she's 34. So she leaves her husband's house at Ikotun. She drives a Venza down to Lekki, and this is what she's into. So it's not a case of, because I don't call hookup girls, I cannot feel the negative effects of hookup. How about someone who is busy and the wife is also doing this? She gets a disease and the husband also gets it. So it's something that is a bit messy. Vixen B has been on the game for 3 years. She's single and she's 21. And she also has a store where she sells used shoes and bags. So whatever she makes from hookup, that's where she puts it. And when shoes and bags are not what people buy every day, when that is not moving, she leaves her daughter, who is, I think, about 6, and her younger sister in the shop, picks up her app, takes an order, just like Uber Eats or something, and she's off, then she's back, and then Vixen C, who is 4 years, is a student of a university in Lagos. She's 27, and she's been in it for 4 years. Next slide. So those 3 stories are particularly interesting to me because I used to think that this should be limited to people who are not married, but then no, married women are into for full time. They do it, and it's not something they hide actually. So, to some important questions: in what ways is the increasing popularity or openness of sex workers contributing to the high percentage of STDs in sub-Saharan Africa? Now, I have narrowed down the effects to STDs alone because I still don't have enough data to prove some other things. But then, data is showing that about 40 million people living with STDs in the world, and sub-Saharan Africa accounts for 50% of them. Then I am trying to link this high percentage of prevalence to the increase in openness of sex workers. When I started this and I started monitoring them on apps, what you see when they advertise is a picture not showing the face. So they crop out the face, they show their body. But recently, if you go on those apps, in message, Bado, everything is there. You see their faces, they put it there, they are proud of it. They give you a profile of what they can do, what they cannot do, how much you pay if you want this, how much you pay ahead, they are coming, their transport or something. So studies have shown that this could be linked to lack of political will and deplorable health facilities. However, sex workers are the #1 agents of transmission across the world due to the nature of their job. Next slide. So what is the driving force behind the recent surge in prostitution? Tentatively, I assume that prostitution is to the female gender what crime is to the male gender. Also, they are undeniably the result of rural-urban migration that has become a difficult menace for Lagos to control. Despite the risk involved, survival instincts make it very difficult for victims to quit. On the question, when I asked, what if you contract a disease, HIV, hepatitis? In fact, most of them only know of HIV. They don't know about hepatitis. They don't think any other thing is more riskier than HIV. And when I asked, what if you contact one of these things? Are you going to quit? He said, no, it's part of it. It's part of the package because they will have to continue to make sure they suppress, they have access to antiretroviral drugs and all. So they know that they can suppress HIV and it will lead to AIDS and they are not willing to quit. So customers beware. Next slide. So just a few reports, my preliminary observation actually, from the available data, one can consider that the interstate migration is the major driver of the continuous popularity and growth of hookup ventures. Now observe, among the 29 respondents, 27 have no SSE or other entrepreneurship skills. One would wonder if what they are currently doing is what they came to do in Lagos. Because I asked, what else can you do apart from this? Did you go to school? Did you learn something? Are you a fashion designer? Most of them, no. No SSE, nothing. So why did you leave where you were living to Lagos? What was your intention? What do you intend to come and sell in Lagos, actually? Then they just said there were opportunities. Someone told them to come to Lagos. Someone brought them to Lagos. All kinds of stories to make it look like they're not doing it intentionally. I'm not trying to judge them, but then when you see people's countenance, when they respond to questions, you tend to want to say, no, you're actually in Lagos to do what you are doing because you are comfortable doing it. You don't know any other thing. And for someone that has been doing this for the past 4 years, you are still yet to learn something. For 4 years, you're not planning to go back to school. You don't want to be a tailor. You don't want to be anything. You just want to continue. So putting the two lines together is, to me, saying that they are doing what they want to do in Lagos. This is their target. So on the question of possibly quitting their present engagements, if opportunities present themselves, okay, fine. If there are opportunities for you outside going to school or something, school might be stressful for you or learning something, are you ready to quit? 17 out of 29 that responded to that question actually say that they can quit only if they earn as much as they are earning from hookup. Now, they are well paid, and I'll get to that soon. They are well paid. They are not in the category of an average salary earner in Nigeria. Way beyond that, yes. And I saw this when I went to Lekki. Within the space of 3 hours, I know how much one of them made. Next slide. Now, how difficult will it be for the government to curb this menace? And I'm linking this to the fact that they said that if only they can earn as much as they do. Hookup is a high-paying venture. An average vixen charges between 20,000 to 30,000 naira for short rest. Within 2 to 3 hours, this is what you pay them. And they do 2 to 3 per day. Sometimes they don't get. And in a week, just imagine them having 30,000 naira in a week. That's 150,000 naira. That's about 600K per month. For people who can afford a 3-bedroom in Lekki, you should know they earn that much. So these are the numbers they earn because of time. For overnight, they 50 to 70,000 naira. The weekly income, according to my estimate, is about 120 to 170,000. So they are not willing to quit except they can get this. There's no government that can give this for now. So another thing why it's going to be difficult for government to curb this is covert patronage. Like all through my years of study, about 3 years, no single man agreed that they patronize these people. So the government wants to catch some people for doing something, but then their customers are so covert, you can barely catch their customers, so they will continue. And one of them even told me that they are not scared of police, because when police raid them, police also need something. So they just pay and they are back home to their business. The conversation continues. Next slide. Now, how does it concern migration? For me to be quick, just 2 out of my respondents are of Southwest origin. All of them are of South-South, predominantly Akwa Ibom and Rivers states. And that is why I'm linking it directly to rural-urban migration, which Lagos has been battling for a very long time. And the thriving hookah business might just be an aspect of the effect of rural-urban migration that is not well studied yet, because people are seeing crime, seeing the stress on amenities and all. But then this might just be one of them. And very soon this might blow up in terms of health issues. Next slide. Yes, this is just a case study of HIV. Next slide, so I can just take the data. Now, this is between 2018 to 2022. Now, for Akwa Ibom, they started off at 4.5, they moved to 4.8. Then the prevalence for those who are yet to contain their HIV is just 2.9. And presently, they are at 4.1% in Nigeria. Now, look at Rivers. Rivers started off as 3.9. They are presently at 5.8. But Lagos, the receiver of the migrants, started off at 1.2. And now, within a space of 4-5 years, 100% implements, 2.4. Now, look at what I mean by the idea of this is going to cause some sort of stress on health facilities. As at 2018, Lagos was managing 102,000 HIV positives. Now, 2022, they were managing 204,000. That's double the number. And in another 4 years, if they can double this, then there will be issues. Then we have to manage scarce, we have to channel scarce resources onto managing stuff like this, simply because we have refused to manage the thriving hookah. Lastly. Now, how does this affect Lagos State? The development of Lagos is a result of the effort of both indigenous and migrants. We agree. But then, however, studies have shown that poorly managed migration has continuously impacted negatively on the state. Overpopulation, climate change, poor infrastructure, including health facilities, have all been traced partly to be impacted by migration. I will propose that hookup and prostitution should also be included in the list of negative impacts of migration. Due to time, I'll stop here. If I have questions during the question and answer, then I'll go to the minute to start.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm not just sure that we actually go through. Thank you very much. Next, we have Abusalari One. Abusalari One is talking on language dynamics and linguistic innovation during general elections in Lagos State. So let's start Abusalari. You are now 15 minutes. And part of that.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. The title of my paper is Language Dynamics and Linguistic Innovation in Title of my paper is Language Dynamics and Linguistic Innovation during the 2023 general election in Lagos State. So, what very about this topic to start? First, one thing that is of importance value in my life, my assistant language. We get to interact with each other based on language, and as a result of our interaction, we begin to have other language like forward. So, I don't have to study. Next one, sorry. Linguistic creativity in election is a powerful tool for candidates to sway voters with persuasive language. The language linguistic diversity at the state as a political bellwether makes it a battle-like ground for linguistic innovation, particularly during electoral periods. Innovation often manifests as new word expressions and slangs that reflect social political climates and resonate with voters. So, based on the importance of language, politicians know that this is an important aspect when it comes to election. So they take important aspect into language innovation during election, which look at slogans, campaign banners, and this. And Lagos is an important aspect of this when it comes to Nigeria, because Lagos is like a the melting ground of other states in Nigeria. So the study enables to provide a comprehensive exploration of the use of language within the urban centers of Lagos during general election by investigating how language dynamics influence the electoral process, the awareness of individuals on the influences of language during campaigns and how it affects the development of the nation. So I looked at how this language affects individuals and the way there is a innovation of language. And if the individuals are they take cognizance of these things as slogan or wherever politicians use during elections is an important aspect of the election. So because if we don't know the importance of this slogan, it affects us because we get to pick people that we are not meant to pick based on we like this slogan, we like this guy, he's fluent in English, he's good looking. Yeah. So we get to pick who we are not meant to pick. So I don't know if people know that slogan takes an important aspect when it comes to decision making. So that's the statement of the problem. So this I said, when queried about various factors that impact voters' choice, responses often include religion, ethnicity, economic conditions, security status, and the charisma of the candidate. Occasionally, individuals are drawn to candidates based on their physical appearance, fluency in English, and other superficial qualities. While extensive research has been conducted on political behavior and voter preference, scant attention has been paid to the role of language and slogans in shaping electoral decisions. If we overlook the influence of language on electoral choices, our understanding of this decision remains incomplete, highlighting the need for further investigation. I think I should know that this is still a work in progress. Slide. So my research objectives are to understand the factors that drive linguistic innovation during electoral periods in Lagos, to assess the effectiveness of this linguistic innovation in shaping voters' behavior, to find out if people are aware of the influences of language used during election campaign, and to examine how language used during election affects the development of Nigeria. So these are the research questions which is from the research objective. Next slide. So we have people that have said something about language, looking at the language attitude in sub-Saharan Africa and examine how linguistic preferences and biases affect communication identity, social dynamic in regions. And we have John Waite of 1991 that explains that language is a unique variation of English in Nigeria, influences local languages and sociocultural factors. And we have Taiwo of 2010 that analyzes how SMS language, characterized by abbreviation and unique synthetic structure, serve various communicative functions within the Nigerian context, offering insight into the sociolinguistic dynamics of mobile communication. Let's slide. So the literature review is just saying what people have said about the language, how important it is to our environment and every basic aspect of human life, because without language, we can't communicate with each other, we can't do some basics. So language makes every nation even interact with each other. So this is the theoretical framework where I look at the language variation, code switching, which helps understand the role of multilingualism and code switching in campaign strategies. Also, critical discourse of analysis to provide a tool to dissect political speeches and social media interaction, uncovering the underlying power dynamics and rhetorical strategies. Where the agendal setting and framing theories, these are the theories that have to do with the media theory, which we are sitting examining the media perspective, because the last election in Lagos 2023, social media space had it was one of the important ways that was used to pass information to everybody. It was one that was more tools that was used to campaign, because we can see from the Twitter, banter, and the Instagram, and so WhatsApp and Facebook. So that's what the gender setting and framing theories we analyze. Next slide. So the methodology. Collecting data from campaign speeches and materials like flyers, posters, campaign material, and political parties. Social media analysis, data from social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and focusing on campaign-related posts, hashtag and mails. Then voter interview, where I where research will interview will be done with diverse sample of voters like the Igbo, Yoruba, and Hausa. Sorry, next slide. So looking at the slogans that was really used in the last election, which we have the Milo point, it's my turn. Kind of a, should I say, that ethnic word that has more effect on the Yoruba people in Lagos State, because Emilokon means it is my turn. And then we have one of the presidential candidates, which is Bola Tinubu, that is from the southwest part, that the Yoruba region. So it kind of is that the motivational slogan that involves in their campaign, during the campaign, to tell the people that it is the turn, and then it's also the Yoruba people's turn to take the seat. So that's one thing. And then we have the obedient that has to do with the one of the campaign for Obi from the LP party, where we have this also came up from the campaign speeches and this and there was a file on Twitter that everybody saying the youth are also more involved in obedience, because they feel like there should be a new person coming instead of the old people that we are used to. And we have the articulated, Batify, the city boy, the one from Lagos that has done Lagos, that they feel like he did a lot in Lagos and then he's going to do more in the general aspect. Then we have the Yoruba role, which also has to do with the Yoruba people, that people should think this seat we have is our turn to take it over. And then when you think about it, you know that it's Yoruba that should be there, which has to be the ethnic part. Sorry, next slide. Then I looked at the campaign strategies, which is one of the research methods. I looked at the multilingual advert, where we have that they use the Igbo, there is going to be an Igbo slogan, and where the Igbos are more dominant in Lagos, Hausa slogan, where the Hausas are more dominant there, and then the Yorubas. Then targeted messaging doing on social media. We have, after everything, there's a hashtag of Emilokon, obedient, Obi's next one, things like that. Use of digital and new media platform. They have to employ the content creator, other people like that, yes, that's so they help them make people more aware. So even people that usually do not vote, but because they have somebody that they like Toya Ima, Funke Akindele, they want to vote because they have a hashtag. Those are one of the things they use to make people more aware of it and vote for them. Then we have the influencers and bloggers, which I already analyzed before, and the rhetorical and persuasive technique, where they use the emotive influence of people like the Yoruba Runu, Igbo is our turn, we own Lagos, Lagos is no man's land, all those things like that. Then we have the emotive language, so using people's emotion, the slogans that we are affected out there. There's going to be a new city, we are going to do this, we are going to do that, we need the slogans. And then we have catchy phrases for songs and jingles that political parties sing when they are campaigning, and the grassroots mobilization in markets, that we have the local women that sell things that are not really on social media, but that's where they can meet them and they start thinking our local, our land, things like that. And then we have the voters engagement, where we have the people saying LP is for OG, Tinubu is for a low fund, things like that. So finally, what I'm just trying to say that language was an important aspect when it comes to voter election. But when done with my data collection. So in conclusion, the 2023 general election in Lagos State demonstrated the critical role of linguistic diversity and innovation in political communication, because it's kind of both like it's a new turn from what every other election that we have seen. Because we see the Igbo people participating, the Yorubas and the Hausa, and then it shows that people they can be different innovation, and people of different ethnicity trying to vote for the Yoruba youth are shifting to vote for the OB, and then also the some of the OB people too are contesting things like that. So leveraging multiple languages, speaking English is also an important aspect of it, because now we can see that speaking English holds one of the important, or it's more like a language innovation that has become almost everybody speaks it, or let's say 90% of people speak English. So they kind of use speaking English or pidgin language to to campaign. And we have the English, the modern digital tools like the social media, political campaigns were able to effectively engage and mobilize voters. These linguistic strategies not only enhance voters' participation, but also enrich the democratic processes in Lagos, because we look at people who were coming in, people that youths that usually would not participate in the election came out because of the social media banter and that. So showing the between this, I'm trying to achieve that we can show the importance of language in political matters that have an effect on development of the state. Because if slogans and words like that are able to change people's emotive in picking somebody without knowing the importance of who they are picking, just because of the slogan of Emilio Kon, Yoruba, Peter Obiza is a youth that if they don't know the importance of this thing and they go ahead to pick somebody they are not meant to pick just because of the language feeling, this affect the development of the state and every other thing for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much about thank you for managing that. Get to the last thing about what I will need to be speaking on stereotyping, implicitly, and also vernacular. Language simulation and legacy from elder classes of the balance and complexity among the educated needs. So we still have 2 minutes to learn from.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Bola. I was living in case meaning that I read of Africa. So my this presentation is about not speak vernacular, language subordination and legacies of colonial classrooms in Lagos and the things that it's not. And we can go. Okay. So the study kind of comes within the concept of language shift. Language shift is basically the movement of the speech community from using one language to another. In the context of Lagos, you can understand it by the phenomenon that more and more Nigerian children are growing up in the city of Lagos with English as a first language rather than. And so one of the contentions of this paper is that one way to understand contemporary language dynamics is to look within history and specifically some of the colonial dynamics that took place before independence and still take place now. We can go. So some of the causes of language shift that scholars talk about include effective language planning, negative language attitudes, globalization, national unity, very many. But you find that much of the scholarship focuses on negative language attitudes. So we saw this in the recent gubernatorial elections in Lagos last year. So in 2023, the Lagos Party, we had a third party candidate called Badebo Groove. He's of Yoruba and Igbo heritage, and he confessed that he did not speak Yoruba fluently. As you can imagine, trying to confess the governor of the Yoruba state, it was very controversial, and it led to a round table in Lagos State University, which they tried to analyze the issue. And some of the observations that they talked about were that there was parental barbarism, and in the Eurocentric promotion of European culture and languages, they also talked about the youth lackadaisical attitude towards their culture and cosmopolitan ideology. So I bring this to cite how we can see the focus is often on negative language attitudes and how individuals feel. Can go on. Less attention is paid to some of the things that we have heard in the past to get us to this point. So this is a tweet from an actor, Yul Edochie, who says, to think that some of our teachers flogged us back then in school for speaking our language, calling it vernacular. Can you imagine? You speak your own language, you get flogged. All those teachers should be ashamed of themselves. When you go, people really mess us up. Go on. So what is vernacular? So vernacular is basically a pejorative term more often than not used. to discuss kind of a lower cultural product belonging to kind of the less educated aspects of society. It's not associated with the educated elite. And this is what colonialists initially used to talk about indigenous languages. They call them vernacular, not language. So in schools, you would have a common refrain: do not speak vernacular. If you spoke one of your languages that is not English, you will get punished. So the problem that I'm raising in this paper is that scholars have not sufficiently grappled with how colonial legacies and systems impact contemporary language dynamics beyond individual decision making. So that there are systems at play and history to even understand the attitudes that we're seeing on ground. So the theoretical framework that this builds upon is the idea of coloniality. It basically suggests that even after the end of colonialism, you have long-standing patterns of power which are still entrenched in the system. And so there's the idea of the colonial term, the need to make visible what is invisible. So if we see that here, what if we look at the concept of do not speak vernacular as a type of colonial travel? Language is often read through the lens of choice. Are you going to speak Yoruba to your children? Are you going to speak English to your children? But less attention is paid on how maybe you don't have as much choice as you think you do. What are the systems and the realities of societies that have limited people's choice and agency? How is shame a part of language learning historically? So some of the concepts that I play with are Anglo-normativity. That is the expectation that everybody will and should be proficient in English. If not, they're deviant or deficient. Another concept that comes out of South Africa is colonial-lingo normativity. It describes that normalized expectation that indigenous people should be proficient in the colonial language rather than the indigenous languages. So we can see how some of these expectations have played a role throughout history. So I'm just going to lay some of the historical context around languages that I argue should be a part of the conversation. So we have three eras that Awuni in 1976 separates Nigeria's educational history. So missionary era, 1800 to 1882. He described how the tongues of the Yoruba people were colonized before the country. Interestingly, this is an era where a lot of instruction took place in indigenous languages. This is an era in which we see things like the Yoruba Bible is transcribed. So we have Samuel Ajayi Crowther, who was credited with the Yoruba Bible. However, the use of the indigenous languages was for a purpose of conversion. And also the way that they represented the language also created new types of languages. What do I mean by that? So you have concepts such as in the Yoruba beliefs, you have the deity issue, who's like a trickster deity. They now made him together. So you can see how you're almost creating a new representation and almost a new language by codifying it. So it's the language is intact, but the language is changed. So then the colonial era, 1882 to 1960, can be characterized as skeptical tolerance. The colonialists, they allowed people to speak their languages, to use their languages, but they didn't really prioritize them. Then we have the post-independence era, 1960 to 1971. And so we can understand classroom policies such as not speak vernacular as coming in this colonial and post-independence era rather than the missionary era. So 1882 ordinance, that controlled the Gold Coast of Ghana, Ghana, which used to be called the Gold Coast, and what is now Lagos Colony. And basically, it provided funding for schools that taught in English. This is important to realize because the colonial government oftentimes didn't create its own schools. It would take the missionary schools on ground and then support them. So we think with the missionary era, the missionary schools are teaching in the indigenous languages, but then you are now incentivized to teach English in one language. So then we can also look at colonial classroom practices. So this is a man called Andrew Bell. He's a British educationalist, and he came up with a monitorial system. It's basically a system in which, in order to conserve resources in the colonies, they would teach older students to teach the younger students. So the teacher would have to share all the time. So what does this mean in terms of language? So in the colonial classroom in modern day Nigeria, courses in English, for instance, will be taught by the teacher. For courses in Yoruba, they'll send an older student to it. So you can see this quote. It is not surprising that the pupils cannot write well or any common object in Yoruba. At present, it is not easy to find a pupil who will write a decent article in Yoruba. This is an inspection of CMS school in 1914. So we can see even back then, they had problems with teaching Yoruba grammar because it was not prioritized. Go on. So another commission report from the education ministry back then, so in 1945, they said that even though a vernacular at its present stage of development may not form a suitable subject for a degree course, the study of the mother tongue is nevertheless still important for the early education of the student. I highlight this because this is basically the colonial policy towards language back then. But it also reflects the policy on ground right now in Nigeria that the recommendation is that children should be taught in the language of their immediate environment at the primary school level, which is exactly what they're saying here. So it's interesting because you kind of think language advocates are innovative, but in many ways they're echoing the colonial government and still restricting it to primary school. And go on. So in this paper, what I did, I had conversations with people born between 1946 to 1965. That was considered baby boomer generation abroad. I'm calling it like independence generation because independence was 1960. It's also around, these people would have been subject to Chief Awolowo's free primary education initiative, which offered free primary education in the Western region. Lagos was not a part of the Western region, but part of modern day Lagos State would have been subject to that. So it's a time where you have a lot of people who may not have been exposed to formal Western education, but because of these initiatives, would have been able to. So people moving from rural areas to urban areas, with first in their family to speak English, it's a time of transition. And so basically, I spoke to people. Somebody talked about how speaking Yoruba was the worst offense that you could have in school. They said even the Yoruba teacher would flog you for speaking vernacular. And so we can see all these different types of punishments that would come: flogging, fines, cutting weeds, imposition. There will be a list of all the students that they heard speaking vernacular. Can go on. So there's also language shaming and ridicule. Some people talked about the fact that the consequences were not just being flogged, it was the fact that you were bullied and shamed by your peers. They said up until today, there's some of my classmates who could not speak English at that time. And when we see them today, you still make fun of them. They never leave. So we can keep going. Effect on the home. So we see instances of people flogging their children at home for speaking Yoruba. It says, we now have children who are born in Lagos, live with their parents who are both Yoruba, both father and mother, yet don't speak Yoruba because their parents were trained to speak in English. So they speak English at home. And so there's questions of agency because a lot of the scholars talked about this as self-control. But in some of my conversations, it didn't seem to be the case. I think we have just grown to speak English spontaneously. Even when you don't want to, you just find yourself speaking English because that's what you've been doing forever. For me, it's not intentional. Each time I speak too much of English and I remember, I do what you guys call code switch straight away, but sometimes I forget. And so there was a bit of, some people felt, oh, this was colonialist intention. Some people felt, well, it wasn't their intention. They just wanted us to learn English, but we didn't know we were downgrading the design process. Keep going. And so there was the question of the next generation. And a lot of people expressed sadness about the next generation. So if now my own children can't speak Yoruba, so what will happen to these ones? Our children are the last generation of fluent Yoruba speakers. Even when they speak the Yoruba now, it's like they speak with a very poor accent. And again, for context, I'm speaking with people who are educated, maybe like 70s, 80s, then for many, maybe they came from poor homes, but this is kind of like maybe more of a middle class to upper class problem, but it trickles down all over. So some of the takeaways that we see is that this idea that your indigenous language will just survive, Yoruba will survive regardless. It's automatic. But people didn't have for subtracted bilingualism. That sometimes when you learn another language, it takes away from the other if the other one is not also invested in. There was also something to be said about shame and culpability. Someone said our own generation started the process of slaughtering the language. And so people are carrying that burden of being the ones at fault. And so I think about the dichotomizing power that Mugimbe stresses about colonialism. Now, one of the things is because it created a tension between rural and urban, oral and traditional. English and Yoruba created these divides. And many of the people I talked to were kind of caught between these dichotomies. Maybe I come from the village, but now they were in an urban English-speaking era. And they saw this transition in real time and oftentimes blamed themselves for it. But I argue that there's a kind of colonial amnesia with Nigeria, because one of the things the letter, I'll just paraphrase, talks about is that colonialism also separated things so that there's now the language of the home and then the language of the school. And that it's hard to, you cannot say that, let me keep going. So basically that the idea of untarnished authenticity is problematic. Because even the indigenous language teaching back then was also kind of influenced by colonial narratives as we see with, okay, we can carry on, sorry. So concluding thoughts, sorry, it's just that, how do we remember history? There's not as much grappling with colonial memory in Nigeria, especially when it comes to this issue. What is the meaning of choice? Nigerian classrooms were characterized by lack of agency. They forced you to speak one language, and yet when we discuss language in the contemporary we speak of choice. Is there really choice? How do we grapple with shame and trauma? And how do we also distinguish, as I was talking about, between the language of home and language of school? That's really good. A lot of advocates will talk about speak your language at home. And that kind of almost it's a remedial measure, it's a palliative. But if you really want to think about this reality, there's a need to question why is there a separate language for home and school? Why is it that you're almost not going to learn the language like you learn properly in school? Some of these things we should interrogate, and I'm arguing that the colonial perspective can help us understand what the changes that are happening.
Thank you very much. Last two that's the first dissertation. So I think that the policy problem, because just as I said, this legalist have talked about so what we're talking is now, as the result of what they did at that time. So how to cope with this? I just need to try to see now policy, other policy that we're not implementing. We continue to progress to see how we can adopt our indigenous linguistic experience and find a way to bring up all these things that but it's not difficult for us to achieve. And that's why I think that you might just have to try to adjust what we have now instead of trying to go back to what we have. It's not possible anymore. Even this focus that I've been on. Another thing is English. I also say so that Nigeria is even trying. You go to other countries, it's very education. For instance, in countries, most Francophone countries, we don't even have regional languages in school. Don't teach it at all. So I think Nigeria is trying, but I don't know how we can juxtapose our effort to our goal. I don't understand how we can achieve that. So thank you very much, everyone. Before our four panelists are presented, we need that. Nobody presented language and syllabus. She talks about language language because Michi talks about short rest or overnight. The tribal talk business in Lagos. It talks about migration, budget of migration, how those conferences are fair. So that is what talks about language dynamics and sure, during general admission to Lagos. Explaining how politicians and for the English use language resource procedure. And spoken language do not speak Arabic. So now we have time for questions, comments. So, let us okay, so, so we go first, and followed by you, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's start with you.
I'm waiting for the mic. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon. What a fascinating session. Well, I'd like to ask Bolatito whether she's thought about doing a comparison with the Irish experience, because Ireland was also under British colonial rule. In that case, they actively suppressed the local language as a government policy. In 1922, after independence, the Irish nation now took a deliberate stance to have the Irish language, at least so if you want to work in government, you must speak it. It's compulsory up to, I think, the equivalent of their A levels. And even though English is the spoken language, like their street signs are in English and in Irish. So I think it might be interesting. And if you want to have a further discussion with that, please see me afterwards. Short time. I was and hook up, yes. I was wondering if you asked, given the age of at least your 3 main people when they came to Lagos, did you consider the possibility, or did you ask them if they had originally been trafficked as house help young? Because a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, where are they going to find the money in the village to buy the ticket to come to Lagos? So perhaps somebody has brought them. And then VI, I thought that perhaps you were a bit unfair on VI, and that perhaps, did you think about the fact that, yes, they may be speaking, they may appear to be devoid of their culture, but did you think about the food they eat at home? And their dressing when they go to parties? We see it on Instagram. We are fully ashoked up. They are eating amala at the parties. So I think, those are my comments.
Thank you very much. So, please, let's make it 1 more minute, if possible.
In all honesty, it was a very, very interesting session. I really enjoyed the session from all the presenters. But then quickly, I'm going to direct my comments to 2 of the presenters. That's Bolatito one and my brother who presented on issue of hookups. Okay, so Bolatito, for starter, you are Bolatito. So unfortunately, I didn't hear you speak Yoruba throughout your presentation at any point in time. So then I asked, do you speak Yoruba? Do you understand Yoruba? So somewhat, I still feel maybe you are also a victim of this menace. But then if you are a victim in your own consciousness, how are you trying to also address this problem? For instance, I have a 2-year-old son, and I told my wife, please don't speak English to my son at home. I was not trained in English language. So now talking about your perspective, that mother tongue is more like a remedial. I don't think it's just a remedial. I think it's one of the major way forward, right? Speaking Yoruba at home is one of the major way forward, because when we say that speaking our indigenous language as medium of instruction in school, especially in a country like Nigeria, that we are multi-ethnic, it is going to be almost impossible, because Are you going to do that to, are you going to adopt Yoruba or Igbo or Hausa or what? So, and that's that. Then for my brother, very, very interesting again. So I asked, these married ladies that are also hookups, are their husbands aware? Aha, okay, thank you very much.
Next, 1 minute, 1 minute.
Yeah, I want to thank all the presenters. It's been a very interesting period. I've been given 1 minute. I don't know I can be done with that. Maybe I want to talk with the presenters after because it's really been interesting. Nigeria is a multilingual nation. So being able to pin down a particular language is a very dicey one. And that's one of the reasons why English language is still dominating. So like I said, we might have to do most of the work at the home front. I made my children to speak English at home. I mean, Yoruba at home. In fact, there was a time I made a rule that to be able to speak Yoruba throughout the day, you're going to get an amount of money. And it paid up later in life because the youngest twins, they're now 26. By the time my Taiwo went to the university, she studied nursing. She was at a teaching hospital. She had to be the one interpreting English to Yoruba because the patients in the hospital were Yorubas for some of our classmates that couldn't speak Yoruba. So I've seen that being able to speak a Nigerian language is now an added advantage. You watch some of our home videos. When you want to have a child to speak, you now ask the child to speak English. You hardly ever find a Yoruba or an Igbo child being able to speak a Nigerian language. So we must speak to ourselves. We want to do it at the home front. Then I just want to summarize, like most of us obtaining data from prostitutes, you want to, from some other sources, you want to think about ethical considerations. Otherwise, we'll be affected at the end of the day. Thank you. So
Thank you very much. The policy thing, I think that Dr. Kudus, let's have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. Wonderful panel. I really enjoyed listening to everyone. But of course, Majid, if you have time after the session, you can talk. I feel that you have a very important data that you need to be dealing with, and you are caught between trying to feel that you are solving societal problems. You know, this idea of menace, how you are dealing with the story of your participants. I think it's really, really important that you move back a bit and ask yourself why you are doing this research, because it is not very productive as a scholar for you to try to represent your participants in a way that criminalizes them. It's very, very important. That is something that I mean, it comes off in many ways. You talk about how you are not judging them, but everything, the way you talk about or presented your data, your struggle to link it to HIV/AIDS, which of course we know is driven by a lot of other factors. We know that the resurgence of HIV/AIDS, for instance, in Oyo State and some other places, is driven by the incidence of men having sex with other men and all of those things. So all of these dynamics are there, and you shouldn't stop to try to do that because, of course, for instance, you didn't study how they manage hazard and all of that, you know, particularly on the part of the workers and things. So don't stretch yourself too much. You have a lot of very beautiful things that you can do with your research. Now, the obedient person, you can check if obedience is instead of obedience, you know, try to confirm that. And I like the language research. I think it's very, very innovative. But I'm curious to know, you know, we keep talking about how the colony is fighting back and all of that. But what is also happening is that so-called ex-colony is also fighting back. Because recently I've had to do what's called language verification for a friend who did BSc, Masters, and PhD here in Nigeria. And here is the key. He's also currently working and doing research at a UK university. So he's trying to do a certification and they said you have to like language. So how do you manage that, given the global context of the damages and trauma that came from colonial language?
Thank you very much. So I think the ethical thing is very important for Ujibade. That's solve the problem.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks to the presenters also. It has been a very exciting afternoon. I have a major interest in the hookup research. And why is that? I work as a public affairs counselor and I'm a counselor. So I want to first ask, what is the statement of your research problem? because there must be a problem that you are trying to address. And in all of the presentations, that wasn't revealed. Then I'm also interested in what is your area of discipline? Area of discipline. Are you a sociologist? Are you a linguist? You are a linguist, good. So this will now take me to the question I want to ask. Talking about hookup, it doesn't have to do with the female. There are male hookups, there are female hookups. And while talking, you made something clear. While trying to make some analogies, you talked about how government should put some policies in checks. And I want to ask this specific question. What is the offense that a transactional sex worker has committed? I'm not sure. Note that question. What is the law that a transactional sex worker has committed? Then in totality, the hookup services, you made it look like some kind of offense. Meanwhile, if you have ever asked the barber to cut your hair, it's a service. If you have ever had a laundry or somebody to massage you, it's a service. So hookup is a form of social services that people also get engaged in by the use of their body based on their own free will. And they've not committed any offense. So I want you to look at the angle of hookup as a social services. If you're not looking at it from the medical perspective of the implications on the individuals who are engaged based on job hazard. So it's a professional service, just as you said, that they have website, they have like any professional organization. So it is a job of which that anybody can get. If hookup does not exist in a society, are you saying that those men who are not married or who do not have women in their lives should not go to hook up and go to children or go to, so where do they go to? If those services are not there. So examine it from that front.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering if prostitution is not against the law of the land.
All right, thank you. To you, my brother, hook up. I'm sorry, so I have to tag you. I'm interested about your population. You are giving a statistics that probably, if I'm not wrong, you interviewed, your respondent, that there are 26 are SSC holder. They don't have SSC at all. Why the remaining one are, if you look at that gap, because there are also research, it is not only those that are not learned that are involved in this business. We have learned, go and search even in our campuses. So, and I've seen, so not only, so I want you to also look at the statistics. And lastly, to the last speaker, Mojisola, I know you are, it's as if you are pinching me when you are delivering your paper, because I'm guilty. My wife is Igbo, I'm Yoruba. 3 of my children, none of them can speak Yoruba. And I've been struggling, they cannot speak Igbo. So I've been trying to struggle. And my daughter is investing. I'm trying to train her, even online, talk to her. She was testing me. I was speaking Yoruba to her. She was replying in English. So Yoruba to party, so Yoruba for me, need alone. My take is this. We have been colonized that using English, they made us to believe that English, speaking good English is a test of intelligence. And that is where we got it wrong. And if somebody is speaking, they make a mistake in English, it will easily be noted, and he's not speaking, he's speaking wrong. But why is that when you make a mistake in Yoruba, nobody frown at that? Why in English? Because that's biasness.
Thank you very much. Who else?
Thank you. I want to say that people don't notice the error you make in Yoruba because many people don't even know the grammar of the language. So I'll go straight forward to Miss Bolatito. Don't worry, we'll still speak in camera. Okay, so I was wondering, you said you and the chair actually said it's a policy issue. And I was wondering, is it actually policy or implementation? Because the policy has been there for as long as I have known. And then also, is it policy, is it just implementation, or is it we that we are in this room? Isn't it just our attitude, to these are indigenous languages? He just said something now, but I want to tell you that it's still doable. If your children are still less than 15, start speaking it. Before 2-3 years, they will catch up. I have tested that, and I've seen that it has worked. And then, so my 1 minute is over. Sorry. And then, many people here have said that because we are in Nigeria, we have a lot of indigenous languages. How is it going to be possible for us to have one language? Like Ms. Gomez said the other time about Irish, the Irish language policy and all of that. And I want to say that how many of us have heard about Niger? There's Niger, what we now call the Pidgin English is what we now call Niger. They have a conference on Niger. And I was speaking with my prof just recently that there's going to very soon going to be like an academia of Niger where all our indigenous languages can have contribution. And then we now have what we can call a standard Niger. So, but it starts from how many of your indigenous language does your children know that will now be contributed into the Niger so that we don't have this problem all over again. Thank you very much.
For 1 minute, sir. Oh, okay. Well, it's a wonderful panel, and I'm excited at the level of presentation and arguments. This matches international standard. I'm happy. We are doing very, very well. Let nobody tell me that the standard of education has fallen in Nigeria. No, that's not. I've been to places, and what I've just had now is very good. So, congratulations. I'm a linguist, so I don't want to start talking about. Some of the others are even my students. That was what I see. And sometimes we even disagree on some of these issues. There is the National Language Policy that came out just 2 years ago, and things are well spread out there. There are policies, just like Dr. Eleshin said. It is the implementation that is the problem. And there seems to be a way out with this Niger thing that's coming up. I think we should put emphasis on Niger because there is this fear of domination coming from everywhere. If we adopt this, this will happen. Adopt this, that will happen. Since we failed to adopt Swahili as an African language, it is now in AU, and that's the only African language used in AU for now. Very, very popular language, well spoken, but has not been standardized as well. So I think for Nigeria, as the most populous Black nation in the world, not only in Africa, we should put emphasis on Nigeria, develop the lexicon, bring up terms, get terminologies to bring up, have groups, health, agri, education, engineering, have groups all over the place, and let us develop very strong terminology so that we can bring it into the formal sphere. It is still in the informal, although it is now first language of some Nigerians. That means it has been creolized. That is why you can cast news in Niger, in some parts of the country. So the adoption of Niger would put down the fear of domination. And then we can have an identity from there and say this is our own. Even the name given to it now says it is for all of us, even though some parts of the country have some influence, but it's always like that. Then, regarding your own case, sir, I'm sorry. If you speak 10 languages to children, they will capture all of them. Children that grew up in Agege, in face-to-face homes, where you have some inmates speaking Hausa, Urobo, Ijo, they capture all of those languages very well. They have that. It's there. It's there. The language faculty is open. Don't be afraid. Just speak your Igbo. Let your wife also speak her Yoruba. So then freely, they will speak the truth. So there is no fear at all. And that is where it lies, even though Tito was saying that there is the fear of dichotomy, language of school, language of the home. We can have it that way, yes. Let us speak languages to our children at home. Let them learn the English outside. It is bad enough that we cannot communicate with ourselves. in our languages, aside from English. It's bad enough. But we will still move if we all make up our minds that we speak our languages to our children. I even see traditional rulers speaking English while in that Galia. That is shameful. And I've told some of them that I met, you can come in beats and be speaking. Who are you trying to impress? Get an interpreter. Your non-official should never speak English in public. He shouldn't. But here we are. Children see them speaking English on the TV. So how do you convince them that our languages are good enough to address it? Inside closed door, you can speak English with your host. But when you are in front of the camera, you don't have to speak the English language. And it has happened before. Muammar Gaddafi, I never had to speak English in public. And he trained in Sandhurst in England. So you won't tell me he didn't speak English. As a matter of when you are leading the people, the same with Saddam Hussein, he will speak Arabic alone outside. And also trained in the US Air Force. So these are leaders that are worthy of emulation. And I think we should also go in that direction.
Okay, so what minutes? It's more than 1 minute. Actually, let me just be clear. I would like to say thank you to all the presenters. You've done very well. And I'll just make short comments on each of the presentations. The first one, yours. I think there's need for you to look at enclaving and how language has moved, and also the things that have moved also beyond language. And then post eviction, when we look at places like Otodo Bame, this has also caused a lot of changes. And then in looking at enclaves, I think it's also important for you to look at enclaves where people have settled, like Agege, like Obalende and things like that, and where they have settled and remained, and how the language has perhaps transformed over time. And then back to yours. Yes, I was curious about your background when you started, because you weren't saying anything about language. Perhaps the transition from prostitution to hookup. And what I see from your presentation is that the difference between prostitution and hookup is just the use of technology. That's it. The service still remains to a certain extent. The only thing is how people are able to access the service. They are no longer going to the streets, they're going to an app. So perhaps that may be a good place for you to think about, especially as a linguist. How has technology changed how people perceive or how people interact or how people negotiate for this service, the language that they are using, the interpretations, and even sometimes the appropriation of language. Because before it was appropriated for commercial sex, hookup had a different meaning. So perhaps those would be the kind of things you should be looking at. And then a moralistic standpoint kind of tends to blur the importance of what you're looking at. And then I was a bit confused when you were talking about migration. The fact that somebody is from Rivers State or from Akwa Ibom doesn't mean they were not born in Lagos or their family is not from Lagos. So that's also something. And then, yes, the question is prostitution illegal? Is there something in the code book that criminalizes it? So that's also something you should be thinking about. And then when you talked about the links between prostitution and HIV or prostitution and STDs, I think, that was also kind of narrow. Perhaps from a linguist's point of view, you should also be talking about how do they communicate their risk? How do they communicate their fears? How do they communicate, these kinds of issues? What kind of support do they have and things like that? So those are the kind of things we'll have been expecting from you. How has the language of that profession changed over time? And yes, people, just let me respond that, I'll call them back. People enter into this kind of service for a variety of reasons, including vulnerability, including survivor, you know. And I think in your methodology is also very important for you to identify the specific cohort you're looking at. Because this hookup that you talked about, what I see is that you picked the cohort of those who are not educated, so to speak, because if you picked the ones that are on LinkedIn, many of them have degrees. If you picked the ones that whose area of jurisdiction is around the Akoka area, many of them are undergrads or postgrads. So that's also something you should think about. And their educational status, their aspirations, you ask them if they were going to leave, not whether they had other aspirations. And I think that came from also the moral dilemma. So your positionality needs you need to step back a bit and then see them first as human beings and a research object, all right? Something you want to understand. Because at the end of the day, I assume all of you are PhDs. At the end of the day, a PhD is a journey of understanding, right? Not a journey of finding solution. And I think that's the problem, you know, that we often have to grapple with. We want to understand the situation. It is after we understand, it is during your postdoc that you can become a UN consultant and you can start providing solutions. And then to the lady who did the research on the lexicons and all of that, it will have been interesting for us to see how this has changed over time, because you spoke about some candidates who have been candidates for a number of years. So perhaps if you took us on a journey of the kinds of, you know, language that they have used over the years, how it has changed over time, and how people have been influenced by it, you know, that will have, I think we'll learn